If you're watching this video, chances are you're worried about someone you love. Maybe it's your spouse, a friend, your child, your sibling, and maybe you've had the same conversation with them over and over again about the fact that you're worried and things seem to be getting worse with their addiction. You know they need help, but every time you bring it up, it turns into an argument. They shut down or they promise they'll change. I'm Rachel Goldstein. I've spent nearly 2 decades around the recovery community between internships, my own treatment experience, and being in recovery myself. And one of the things I've learned is that trying to convince someone to go to treatment is one of the hardest things a family can experience. And when you love someone and you're watching them in active addiction, you want to fix it. Unfortunately, it just doesn't always work like that. Sometimes you can't make someone get the help that they need. And understanding where their resistance comes from and some of the things you can do to try to push them in that direction can be really helpful and a very good place to start. I think one of the biggest mistakes families make is thinking that if they can just explain things well enough to their loved one, if they argue enough, if they can show enough evidence, that will push their loved one, friend, sibling to get the help they need. And sometimes this works, but a lot of time it doesn't. And this is because addiction has a way of making people minimize things. It has a way of skewing their reality. And if it were as simple as just being able to explain the truth to someone, a lot more people would get into treatment a lot sooner. What often ends up happening instead is the person you're talking to, they start saying things aren't that bad. They compare themselves to other people, and then eventually they shut down, and that sort of ends the conversation. It makes it really difficult for them to hear you, and it makes it really difficult for them to admit to themselves that they might need help. And this can turn into an argument. It can turn into them stonewalling and just shutting you out completely. And that becomes a really difficult place to be. And that doesn't mean that you stop talking about it completely, but it does mean that maybe you take a different approach. Something that's really important is to make sure that you're having this conversation at the right time. Don't have the conversation with someone when they're under the influence. They won't be able to hear what you're saying. Try to find a time where they're a little bit more clear-headed. Also, try not to have the conversation when you're super emotional and angry or sad. This makes it often turn into an argument or a fight, or it makes it more about you than it is about your loved one getting help. And they may get more defensive and just not really hear what it is that you're saying. So try to choose a calm setting. Don't do it in front of other people to embarrass them. The goal is to make sure that they just really hear you. It's not to prove that you're right. It's not to prove that they're doing something wrong. It's just to have a conversation that they really can hear. It's also helpful to understand what your loved one or friend is afraid of, why they really don't want treatment. And it's not always as simple as just they don't want to stop using or drinking. Sometimes it's they're afraid of withdrawal. They're afraid of failing treatment. They don't want to lose their job, their kids, their family. They don't know how to interact with people sober. Whatever the reason is, it's not always as simple as it seems. And it's helpful to understand where they're coming from before you have this conversation with them. So once you have a better understanding of what your loved one is going through and you've picked the right time to have the conversation, the next question is usually, okay, but what do I actually say? It's complicated. And by this time, when families are ready to start talking to their loved one about treatment, there's been a lot of things that have happened in a lot of cases, whether you've lost sleep, whether they've been arrested, if they've had treatment already before. Maybe you feel like you're walking on eggshells around them and you're worried about their life. So when the conversation finally happens, sometimes all of that fear and frustration comes pouring out. And I get it, and it makes sense why that happens, but that can be really counterproductive because even if everything you're saying is true, it can leave your loved one feeling attacked. And again, that can lead to them shutting down and they'll start defending themselves, and it can just make the conversation more difficult than it needs to be and way less productive than it could be. Instead of focusing on getting them into rehab right away, it can be helpful to start from a place of concern or curiosity. Something as simple as, look, I've noticed that something doesn't seem right with you. You seem off. I'm worried about you, without accusations. You're just trying to start a conversation here and get an understanding for how they're feeling, if they might be ready for help already, and what you can do to help. So you can talk about things you've observed. You can say, look, I noticed you've missed work 3 times over the last few weeks, or you haven't been coming to family functions anymore, or it seems like you're having health problems. I want to know what's going on, what's happening, and how can I help you? The goal here is just to show them you care. You want to know how they're feeling. If they're happy with where things are right now, you want them to understand that there's someone out there who actually cares about their well-being. So you're not trying to have every conversation at once right now. You're not trying to talk about rehab, insurance, withdrawal, family, all of these things, right? You're just sort of trying to open the door and start this conversation. So, they're going to be afraid of what comes next. They might be defensive, they might be scared, but you just want to let them know you've noticed, you're paying attention, and that they're not alone. And that's really one of the most important things you can do for them right now. Another thing I think that sometimes families overlook is how overwhelming it can be to go to treatment, even if the person wants it. So it can be really helpful for them to just know that you're willing to help. That doesn't mean you have to pay for it. It doesn't mean you have to make every single phone call. It doesn't mean you have to set up childcare, but just being there and sitting next to them while they make phone calls, or agreeing to make some phone calls for them, or figuring out what treatment centers their insurance covers. Just being there to help them overcome some of these barriers can be really helpful for someone who actually wants to get help. This means having some sort of plan if your loved one does say yes, right? So many people spend so much time thinking about what they're going to say, how they're going to convince their loved one to go, that if they just say yes, then there's no plan of what to do right at that point. So you don't have to have everything set up immediately. But at least having some insurance information and having some ideas of where you and your loved one can call, that can be a really helpful place to start, because when someone agrees to treatment, you really want to get started pretty quickly. You'll want to consider also if your friend or loved one would benefit from staying close to home or going to a treatment facility farther away. And this really depends on the situation. When healthy family involvement is possible, being able to participate in family treatment, visit when it's appropriate, and remain connected to a support system can be really helpful while your loved one is going through recovery. If there are relationships, friendships, and situations about being close to home that would not be as good for their recovery, then it can be really useful for them to go farther away in some cases. That's one reason some families look at programs like Avenues Recovery, which has different locations across the country. And so you can choose a location, whichever makes most sense for you and your family, and there's still a very significant alumni support network for each of these facilities. And that can be really helpful when they finish treatment. It's a large network of facilities, but one that people say feels really personal and supportive. And that's something that many people overlook in this process, is the importance of that support once treatment is finished. So, of course, that's just one option among many. There's treatment centers all over the country. There's so many different facilities. But just keep in mind that that support system is really important. What if your loved one still says no? After these conversations, after you telling them how much you care about them, you being willing to help, sometimes the answer is still no. And that's probably the hardest part of this process. And the unfortunate reality is that you might do everything right, and you might not get the outcome that you're hoping for. You know, your loved one might say that they're gonna change, they don't need treatment, they'll just go to 12-step meetings on their own, or they'll just completely shut down and maybe cut you out for a little bit. Sometimes that happens. And it's totally normal to be frustrated, scared, sad, helpless, angry, even hopeless. But if they say no, you don't have to take that as being the end of the road. There are still options that you can and should consider. Okay, so your loved one said no, and it's like, now what? Okay? Take a breath, because a no today doesn't always mean no. It doesn't mean no forever. It's hard, your feelings are valid, but you're not alone, and there are other things that you can do. So first, you can speak with an addiction counselor. A lot of people don't realize that addiction professionals can help family members and not just the person that needs help. So they can help you understand what's happening, develop a plan, discuss next steps, and determine whether a different approach might be helpful. The next thing you could do is consider a formal intervention. Sometimes a more structured intervention can be appropriate, and this is especially true when there's multiple family members or friends who have been affected by your loved one's addiction, previous conversations haven't worked, or there are safety concerns that are increasing and you're truly worried about your loved one's life. If you're considering an intervention, it's generally a good idea to get professional guidance first rather than trying to organize one entirely on your own. Next, you need to start trying to set healthy boundaries. This can be one of the hardest things for families to do, because healthy boundaries might mean no longer giving your loved one money, no longer covering up their actions and consequences, no longer helping them continue behaviors that support their addiction. This doesn't mean you can't speak to them. It doesn't mean you have to cut them out of your life entirely, though for some people that might actually be what they need to do. And that's also okay. What's important to keep in mind is that boundaries are not punishment. They're protection for both of you and your loved one. And if you set a boundary, it's important to be willing to keep it. Because if you say you're going to do something and you don't follow through, the person you're trying to help is going to learn that and won't take you seriously. There are also housing decisions that you might have to make. For some families, this might mean changing living arrangements, asking someone to move out of your house. These are major decisions, and there's not one answer that fits for every single family. And again, this is somewhere that it's really a good idea to speak with a professional, an addiction counselor, a formal interventionist, just someone who can help you figure out what to do from here. And lastly, and honestly, probably most importantly, is to take care of yourself. I've seen so many family members become completely consumed by trying to take care of their loved one that they essentially just lose themselves. They become exhausted and anxious, depressed, overwhelmed. You need to get support for yourself and take care of yourself, or you won't be able to help anyone. So see a therapist, go to an Al-Anon or Nar-Anon meeting, join other support groups. Just talk to people who understand what you're going through, because you need support too. You can love someone and encourage treatment, but it's not selfish to take care of yourself. So just remember that these things are all options. No doesn't mean no forever, but you have to take care of yourself before you can take any further steps. What I really want you to remember is that you're not responsible for somebody else's recovery. You can support them, you can encourage them, you can help them make phone calls, you can love them. You can do a lot of things for them, but you can't make this decision for them. And even if you can convince them to go to treatment, you can't make them work the program. That's going to be on them. So you can continue showing up for them with honesty, compassion, and consistency while also taking care of yourself along the way. So I know this is a difficult place to be in when you're trying to get help for someone you really care about, but I hope this video helped a little bit and gives you an idea of where to start and just kind of where to go from here. And I wish you nothing but luck for you and your family.